Our speaker this morning is a resident of my hometown, Eugene, Oregon. Eugene is a hotbed of creativity where drug-pushing peaceniks like myself flourish. Drug-pushing peaceniks, you say? Think polio vaccines and peace centers. Just last week, Mahatma Gandhi's grandson, Arun, was in Eugene to help raise funds for a local bookstore. It is the home to the Slug Queen, who rules Eugene from her throne in the public library. The restroom in the public library. You don't have to be Bill Walton or even Hal Kibbe to be comfortable in tie-dye and sandals. Quite simply, Eugene is a melting pot of ethnic groups, ideologies, and personal philosophies where new ideas are encouraged and nurtured. It is a place where one extraordinary person with one simple but incredible idea can change the world. That's exactly what our speaker did. Nancy Hughes had an idea. It was an idea that would improve the health, environment, and economy of communities without fuel-efficient and safe stoves. Nancy took her idea and turned her passion into action, which resulted in sustained, life-saving changes for the people of Guatemala and elsewhere. She is the founder and president of Stove Team International, which has been featured in the Rotarian magazine and Forbes magazine and numerous other publications. The honors and awards given to Nancy are simply too numerous to list in a 2-minute introduction, but I'd like to mention a few special ones. In District 5110, we are especially proud that, like Miss Hussey, she is a White House champion of change. The same year, 2013, she was recognized as a CNN hero. She is a recipient of the Service Above Self. Perhaps the one that means the most to Nancy is the International Purpose Prize. This is an award that's given to an individual over the age of 60 who has made a significant contribution to the world. Competing against global participants, Nancy received $100,000 as the overall international winner. Nancy Hughes embodies the power of one and how one person can make a difference. We have the good fortune of having Nancy with us this morning to share her journey from Eugene resident to international entrepreneur and humanitarian. When she completes her speech and you'd like to talk to her or learn more, she's going to have her stove and herself out in the foyer this morning so you can talk to her about Stove Team International. It is with great pleasure and privilege that I introduce Nancy Hughes.
They make this world black.
I don't even recognize that woman she was talking about.
My hands.
So we're going to start with a video. So
couldn't
you can
wash it
close
away.
your eyes if you want to.
The pots were black. The air was black. It was impossible for breathing.
We have seen forest reserves in 3 years completely gone, not a single tree standing there.
Three billion people use biomass, so wood, dung, charcoal, agricultural waste, and they cook those on very rudimentary open fires. That smoke kills roughly 2 million people each year, mostly women and children. So that's double the number of people that die from malaria each year.
The most dangerous activity a woman in the developing world can undertake is cooking for her family.
and most of them have a baby on the front or a baby on the back. So that baby is inhaling so much smoke, it's equivalent to 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
Cooking on an open fire contributes more black carbon to the atmosphere than all of the cars and the trucks in the world combined.
To make a ton of charcoal, it takes about 10 tons of trees. The forests are just vanishing.
The production and distribution of ultra-clean cook stoves that nearly completely eliminate smoke and reduce fuel consumption.
This new stove, look at this with your eyes. There is less smoke, and it uses much less fuel.
The black is gone. I feel healthier, and my children, they are no longer sick.
What's the best way to design a stove to reduce smoke and increase performance? Our goal is to really bring researchers, designers, engineers, business people together. So it takes all of these people all under one umbrella to get the right stove into the hands of women. Normally a stove project, you go down there, it's totally screwed up, the design doesn't work, it uses more than the open fire. I mean, it's just like 1,000 things go wrong.
We're, mentally prepared for corruption. So stuff's going to get just lost, held up, arrive, broken. I reckon everything that can go wrong will go wrong.
The scale is huge. We need to make not just 100 million stoves by 2020, but we have to serve 100 million families. To really serve 100 million families, more like 300 million stoves. I mean, this is off the chart. By manufacturing cook stoves, we're going to save thousands of lives, more than 100 million trees. We're going to create local viable jobs, and we're going to reduce indoor air pollution for millions of women. It's an incredible opportunity. We hope you join us.
That's the issue. You probably didn't know much about it before. Some of you did because you talked to me about it in the hallway. But I thought I would start with that to give you an idea of the issue so you knew why this woman who was, as she said, over 60, decided to do all this nonsense. So in the early 50s, my parents moved. My sister and I had both contracted polio. And our parents, who were working at Lockheed, had decided to move to a small town of Claremont, just to be able to go to the hospital when they wanted to, when their child was sick. Because in those days, there were certain visiting hours, and those were the only times you could go visit your child in the hospital. So they moved to Claremont, and they bought a small business. They didn't know anything about business, but they figured they could learn. And what happened was my dad was invited to join Rotary. He didn't know much about Rotary, but he joined. And it turned out to be a wonderful thing for him. The first thing I remember him doing was going down to the barrio and building houses, kind of like the habitat houses for the Mexican laborers who were at that time allowed to come in and work and then go take their earnings back home. So he did that. And then the next thing I remember was Mom with an old mattress in the back of the car, and I went with her down to the barrio, and we were delivering this. I mean, in those days they were double bed mattresses, which hardly anybody uses anymore, but that was taken to a family of 13 who had one bed. So we were doing that just as a bit of generosity to the people in need. Well, then my dad became the president of Rotary, but I still didn't know very much about it. I thought, well, that's something that these guys do that, go out and play golf, even though my dad didn't. But anyway, so he enjoyed it. And one of the things I remember is our Girl Scout troop was asked to make cakes to auction off at Rotary, and I remember being horrified that somebody paid $25 for my cake. And I didn't even know what the money was going for, but I thought it was a pretty weird organization that paid $25 for my cake. So then later I was married, and my husband was a family practice doctor in Eugene, and he was looking for some way to meet people outside of the medical profession. And I suggested, well, why don't you join Rotary? Okay, so he joined, and he also became involved with building a house for Habitat Humanity and, doing fun things with his Rotary Club, and he made an effort to always be there at noon. But then he got breast cancer, and I remember when he was going through chemotherapy, his Rotarian friends would visit him at the house. That was wonderful. And then when he passed away, the Rotary Club invited me to join. And I was the reluctant Rotarian. I thought, what is this club? I had no idea what it was all about. I just knew it was a way that, my dad and my husband had enjoyed meeting new people. So anyway, they asked me to join. And the convincing argument to me, after I was asked, was, well, if you don't like it, you can quit. And I was like, okay then. That's all right. I can do this. So there you go. Anyway, so after he died, I was looking for something to do. My kids were, kind of launched. I was 59 and widowed, and I thought, okay, what'll I do? So I joined this medical team that was going to Guatemala, and I didn't know you could join if you were a housewife. And I thought you had to be a doctor or a nurse. But one of my son's friends was going, and she certainly wasn't a doctor or a nurse, and she was a high school student. And she said, oh, you should go. They need lots of people. Just sign up. So I signed up, and then they said, what can you do? Okay, then, I can cook. Then you'll be in the kitchen. All right, well, that was okay. So anyway, I joined this medical team of 120 physicians and nurses and support personnel. And we flew to Guatemala, and we got in this bus, and we went 15 hours north on the bus to the border of Mexico and Guatemala to a military base. Now, this place was called Playa Grande. Some of you people know Spanish. There was no playa, and it wasn't grande. Anyway, this was an abandoned military base up in the north where people were coming in for medical treatment. A lot of these people had escaped to Mexico during the long war that was going on in Guatemala. To give you an idea of the kind of things we saw, one young man had walked 3 days across the mountain with a wooden chair strapped to his back with his sister strapped to the chair, and she had a ruptured appendix. There is no medical care for the indigenous population, or very, very little. So I was really committed to the work. I was cooking for these surgeons, and I don't know if you guys know any surgeons, but they won't quit. They start at 5 in the morning and they keep going all night, and you have to cook for them because they want to eat something. So anyway, I was working in the kitchen. And then the next year, they asked if I'd come back. So I did that for 10 days at a time for 3 years in a row. And on the third year, this young Quechiquel woman came into my kitchen, and I'm a little bit of an A personality, and so by that time I was in charge of the kitchen. And it happens. Anyway, so she came into the kitchen. Her name was Irma, and she came in, and she spoke only Quechiquel, and at that point I didn't know Spanish, so I had to learn Spanish later. But she came in and she said, can we delay dinner because I want to thank the team. I had fallen in an open cooking fire at the age of 2, and my hands have been burned shut for 16 years, and your team has opened my hands. It was quite incredible listening to her, and I thought, now that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. We can't have these people cooking on campfires inside their enclosed kitchens. This is ridiculous. Maybe I can do something about that. Not knowing the extent of the problem, I found out there were such things as fuel-efficient cook stoves. Okay. The other thing I knew, because, I was getting involved more and more with this medical team, was they were having difficulty recruiting some of the physicians they wanted. They had an anesthesiologist from Florence, Oregon, who wanted to come, but she wanted to bring her husband, and he didn't want to cook in the kitchen. So we had to have something for this guy to do, and a number of other people. So I formed the stove team to go along with the medical team. That's how we got our name. And I recruited, the number of people like this guy and some of my friends, and there were about 10 of us. And we went down to Guatemala with the medical team, and we were going to install stoves. So I thought we were pretty cool, because the first year that we went, and we had 10 people for 10 days, and we put in 120 clean cook stoves in the homes of Guatemalans. How cool, 120 stoves. In a country that needed 6 million. Oh my. Okay, so then I began to realize, as I did this over the next couple of years, that the stoves we were installing were made out of 300-pound pieces of cement. Now, you probably have been to Latin America, and you may know that volcanoes in Central America are endemic. There are 24 volcanoes in Guatemala and 24 languages. And where do the people live? On the sides of the volcanoes. So all of those pieces had to be lugged up on the backs of Guatemalans up to their homes. So I didn't like that very much. I thought, well, that's kind of stupid. So I got frustrated, and I said, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. And so I sort of said, okay, I'm not going to do this for a while. And then I didn't know that the lead designer of cook stoves, Dr. Larry Winiarski, lives in Philomath, Oregon. I mean, who knew, right? Now, I want you to picture Larry. Larry's about this big, and he lives in one of those houses with like 6 cars taken apart in front of it. I mean, who knew he was world famous? Anyway, Larry came to my house, and he knocked on my front door, and he said, Nancy, I'm here with my friend Ken Goyer, and you can't quit. And I was like, I'm over 65, I can quit. And he's like, no, you can't quit. And Ken gave me this book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. So, okay. So Larry says, what do you need? And I said, well, I'm really frustrated with these stoves. They're just not working for me. They're too heavy, and they're a real pain because you have to crawl on people's roofs to cut a hole to put in a chimney. And a lot of the roofs are either really dangerous for me to crawl on, or they're made out of thatch, and so if you put in a chimney, it might burn the house down. This is not cool. And Larry said, well, tell me what you want. So being kind of cheeky, I said, well, I want a portable stove so we don't have to haul these, huge pieces up the sides of the volcanoes. I want a portable stove, and I want to have one made out of all local materials. I don't want to import one from China. I want to establish factories in Latin America so that people down there make them. So if there's some problem, they can just go locally and buy the parts that they need. And I want them to be fuel efficient, and I want to be clean cook stoves, and I want them to be safe, and on and on and on. And Larry said, fine. And I was like, really? Yeah. And he said, well, I'm going to a stove conference in Nicaragua. I mean, who knew there were stove conferences? Anyway, so he said, I'm going to a stove conference in Nicaragua, and I'm going to design a stove for you. And I at that point, I didn't know he was this world-famous guy. And so he said, and I'm going to design a stove for you, and I'm going to find somebody to produce them. And I said, well, fine, have a nice life, goodbye. Didn't think anything of it, And so, I'm still in Rotary, and I'm still this new Rotarian, and I don't have anything particular to do, but I've been running around giving talks and saying, we need money for clean cook stoves. And so people had heard what I was doing. So Anyway, about a month later, I got this call. Hi, this is Larry. Oh, hi. Where are you calling me from? Well, I'm in El Salvador. Oh, really? What are you doing there? Well, I've designed a cook stove for you, and I've found a guy who wants to produce them, and you just need to pay him $500 a month until you can get down here. And I'm like, I'm not paying some random guy in El Salvador $500 a month. I mean, come on, Larry, get real. And he said, no, think about it over the weekend. You know, whatever. So I don't know if you believe in, fairies or God or little angels in the sky or whatever, but on Monday morning I went to my mailbox and I opened the mail and I got a check for $10,000 from the guitarist Carlos Santana for clean cook stoves. Okay. And I thought, as you can hear me say, this is not my fault. I just showed up, right? So I thought about it, and I thought, well, I could give it back. And then I thought, no. And I thought of Irma, and I thought of all those people in Central America, and I thought, no, I really need to do something about this. And so I went to my Rotary Club, and I went in and I said to Dick Briggs, who's a member of Eugene Southtown Rotary, I have this opportunity, and I'm wondering if anybody's interested in being involved, and whether, there are like grants or anything that we can use this money for. And Dick said, well, why don't you talk to the club? So I stood up in front of the club and I said, well, I'm going to go to El Salvador and I'm going to meet this guy who's designed a stove, and I don't know what we're going to do, but does anyone want to sign up? The amazing thing was it was Rotary, and so 3 people signed up to come with me. So okay, off we go to El Salvador. We get to the airport there, and we come out, and there is Larry, and there is this man, Gustavo Peña, with his Excel spreadsheet of our appointments for the week, starting with the Vice Minister of the Environment. Oh my. Okay, so we go off in this ratty car, and we go through all the security and show our passports and all this stuff, and we go into the Ministry of the Environment, and Larry stands up there and explains the stove, and he says, well, you see, it's made like a bucket of cement. The combustion chamber, the orange part here, is made out of field tile, or what you might call Mexican ceiling tile. Anyway, and then in between is pumice. Remember those volcanoes? So that's the insulation. And the Minister of the Environment looks at it and he says, well, it looks a little bit like a toilet, but we'll have to see. He said, I like the fact that it's portable. Let's see it work. So we get it out of the back of the car, and you have to remember, I had not seen the stove work at this point. So we get it out of the back of the car, we put it up in the backyard of the Ministry of the Environment, and you get a few pieces of trash wood, sticks about the size of my fingers, and we put them in, and we light the fire from the top, and the Vice Minister goes and gets a liter pot of water, puts it on the stove, start the stove, no smoke, boiled a liter pot of water in under 8 minutes, the same as a microwave. It's like, oh my goodness. The Vice Minister then says, okay, we've got about $5.5 million for a project like yours. What's your capacity? Oh my. Our capacity was 2 stoves. So anyway, so again, we go back to this cheesy $25 a night hotel where we're staying, and I'm surrounded by these Rotarians, and they're saying, you can do it, Nancy, you can own a factory in El Salvador. And I was like, no way, no way. And then Jerry Riker, who's still working with us, who's our vice president, who's the smart guy, I'm just the one with the passion. Anyway, Jerry says, listen, we can raise money. We've got a guy who wants to produce stoves. We've got an incredible need. Let's just help him, through Rotary, start a factory to produce the stoves. Okay. So we go back to our Rotary Club and declined the offer from the government, which then, of course, it was Central America, so the government changed like 2 weeks later. But so anyway, that offer was off the table. And we went back to Eugene Southtown Rotary, and I went up to Dick Briggs again, and I said, okay, this is the idea. We want to place an order for 1,000 cook stoves that have never been made before with this man in El Salvador, and can we do that? Oh, yeah. Okay, how much money do I need to raise? Oh, well, the grant limit at that point, that didn't involve a lot of other nonsense, was $56,000. And I said, well, what if I try to raise that money and I don't get it? He said, well, you get what you get. I was like, cool, let's just go for the max. So we wrote this grant for $56,000 for these cook stoves in El Salvador. And sure enough, we got the grant. We took a bunch of volunteers down there. We took too many. It was like 36 volunteers for me to manage. But whatever, we had all these Rotarians and others down there, and we basically built a factory in Gustavo's backyard, and he started producing cook stoves. And they just flew off the shelves. I mean, people really liked them. Okay, I thought, well, that's cool. We've done that. Isn't that nice? But that wasn't the end, because what happened was my friend Juan Carlos Chavez, who had been the director of the medical team in Guatemala, called me up. My friend Marco wants to start a factory in Guatemala. Nancy, want to help him? Well, okay. So I called my brother, who's now a district governor for Rotary down in Irvine, and I said, Ray, does your club want to help start a stove factory in Guatemala? And he was like, okay. So we started that factory. And then I was just messing around in Central America, because you know the weather up here and you know the weather down there in the winter. So I was like, screwing around down there. So I was with an intern from Oregon State University, Ethan. So we were messing around, and we were going to go to Tegucigalpa and see if we could find somebody in Honduras to work with us. But it was raining really hard, and I said, okay, well, we're obviously not going to do that. I've always wanted to see the Mayan ruins in Copan, so let's go to Copan Ruinas and look at the ruins. Okay. So off we went to Copan Ruinas, and we got there, and Ethan said, well, I need a flag. I need a country flag, because I've never been to Honduras. I need to buy a flag. And I was like, I just need a smoothie. And anyway, so we go into this tourist shop, and Ethan's wearing this shirt that says Stove Team International. And the guy in there says, oh, what's this Stove Team stuff? And I'm like, I just want to know where to get a smoothie. And he said, well, I'll get back to you. He says, tell me about this stove. He said, we need the stoves here. Yeah. He says, you need to talk to our Rotarians. I said, no, I really don't. I really want to just go get a licuado, a smoothie. So he said, okay, well, you go to that place over there, and they make really good licuados there. All right, so I went and sat down. The next thing I know, this woman comes up to me, and she says, my name is Reina. I'm with the Copan Ruinas Rotary Club. As I said, this was not my fault. Anyway, so then we started a factory in Honduras. So, these factories just keep growing. We just started one in Nicaragua. So, as I said, I just sort of got involved with this kind of by accident, and it's all because of Rotary. So, Stove Team became an international nonprofit in 2008. Our stoves have been tested by the Environmental Protection Agency, and I've gotten all these weird awards that, who knew? But I'm sure my sister is just shocked. Anyway, that's just something that's not part of our family. Anyway, so we became this international nonprofit. I go to these meetings for the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves. Anyway, and we go all over the world, and we talk about stoves, and we're real geeky when it comes to that kind of stuff. But anyway, we've started sustainable businesses that have produced, now I have to look at the numbers here because I'm not a numbers person. We've produced 56,334 safe, portable, affordable cook stoves, improving the lives of over 422,000. So back to the numbers. They save 86% of the, they've been tested, 86% of the particulate matter, 68% of the carbon emissions that are coming out of mostly open cooking fires, and use 50% less wood. So I didn't know very much about Rotary, as I was the reluctant Rotarian. I mean, I really had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't know anything about stoves, and I didn't know anything about business. I just wanted to help. Rotary helped me. Thank you.